All right, let's dive into a really big idea in world history. It's a concept that tries to explain the absolutely explosive rise of three massive empires that basically reshaped the globe. It's called the Gunpowder Empire theory, and it's a fascinating, powerful, and, as we're about to see, a pretty hotly debated way of looking at the past.
I want you to picture the year 1453. For more than 1,000 years, the walls of Constantinople have been legendary, a symbol of unbreachable power. But now there's a new sound, a sound that literally shakes the ground. It's not swords clashing, it's a deafening, terrifying roar. These are massive cannons, some of the biggest the world has ever seen, and they are pounding those ancient defenses into dust. This moment, right here, this wasn't just the end of a city. It was the start of a whole new age of warfare.
And that new age gave birth to what historians later called the Gunpowder Empires. The term points to three absolute behemoths: the Ottomans in Turkey and the Middle East, the Safavids over in Persia, and the Mughals down in India. And the core idea of the theory is that their incredible rise, their ability to create these stable, centralized empires, was fueled by one single revolutionary technology: firearms.
So how did this work exactly? Well, the central idea is that gunpowder didn't just win battles. It actually built states. It gave rulers the power to crush any rivals and sweep away the old way of doing things, these loose, shaky tribal groups, and replace them with something totally new, these vast, centralized, bureaucratic empires.
A historian named Hodgson actually came up with a name for this new type of government: the military patronage state. It kind of works in 3 steps. First, the ruler's law becomes the only law that matters. Second, the entire state, its people, its economy, all of it, is organized like one giant military machine. And third, everything, from the taxes you pay to the art that gets made, is all geared towards supporting that military elite. Gunpowder was the key that unlocked this insane level of control.
And another historian, William McNeill, he really hit the nail on the head. The key word in his whole theory is monopolize. See, in Europe, the technology for making guns was pretty widespread, which led to this constant arms race between lots of smaller states. But here, the first rulers who got a complete monopoly on cannons and muskets could reach a level of power that nobody else could even touch. That monopoly, it was everything.
But, history is never really that simple, is it? More recently, other historians have started to poke holes in this gunpowder first idea. They're arguing that, yeah, cannons and muskets were obviously a huge deal, but maybe, just maybe, they're not the whole story. Suddenly, the theory itself is, well, it's under fire.
So here's the core of the debate. The original theory says technology was the engine, that gunpowder created these new kinds of states. But the modern critique kind of pushes back. It suggests that other forces, things like religious unity or just plain old political ambition, were already pushing these societies toward absolute rule. Gunpowder wasn't the cause, it was just a new, powerful tool they picked up along the way.
And when you really start to dig in, some cracks definitely appear. For one thing, the timeline is a bit messy. A lot of these empires started their big conquests before guns were a central part of their armies. And the will for absolute power, that was already there. Plus, the theory doesn't really explain some of the weird quirks, like why the Safavids in Iran kept favoring their traditional cavalry with swords and bows for centuries, even after they had access to firearms.
Okay, so to really get to the bottom of this, let's put the theory to the test. Let's take a look at each of these 3 incredible empires, the Ottomans, the Safavids, and the Mughals, and see how well the gunpowder first idea actually holds up in the real world.
Let's start with the Ottoman Empire, because they are the absolute poster child for this theory. I mean, they were incredibly early adopters, using cannons way back in the 14th century, even before a lot of their rivals in Europe. Then comes that legendary siege of Constantinople in 1453, where their monster cannons did what everyone thought was impossible. And later, at the Battle of Chaldiran in 1514, it was their superior firepower that just crushed a rival empire. For the Ottomans, it seems pretty simple. Better guns led to a bigger empire.
That battle, Chaldiran, is a huge turning point. And to really get why, you have to look at it from the other side, from the Safavid Empire's perspective. The Safavid leader, Shah Ismail, he bet everything on this glorious traditional cavalry charge. But they charged straight into a fortified Ottoman line of cannons and elite musketeers. The result was an absolute, unmitigated disaster for the Safavids, and a very brutal lesson in modern warfare.
And you can see the results of that lesson in the numbers. It's just staggering.
Before Chaldiran, the Safavids had basically 0 musketeers. Just 2 years later, boom, they've got a corps of 8,000. By 1521, that number explodes to 20,000. This wasn't some slow evolution. This was a frantic, life-or-death scramble to catch up.
And this is where the simple theory starts to get a little more complicated. For the Safavids, gunpowder wasn't the tool they used to build their empire in the first place. No, it was a technology they were forced to adopt just to survive after that massive military shock. They were already building their empire based on this incredible religious passion and political drive. Firearms just became the thing they needed to protect what they'd already built.
All right, now let's hop over to the Mughal Empire in India. Their founder, Babur, is such a fascinating character. See, he didn't just get his hands on some cannons, he actually imported an Ottoman expert to teach his army how to use them effectively. At the huge, decisive Battle of Panipat, he used a classic Ottoman playbook, cannons and muskets in the center, shielded by wagons, with his fast-moving cavalry archers on the wings. It was this combination of technology and brilliant tactics that allowed his tiny force to defeat a much, much larger army.
Get this number in your head, 24.2%. At the empire's peak, that's the share of the entire world's population that was living under Mughal rule. The innovations Babur brought didn't just win a single battle. They laid the groundwork for a global superpower of unbelievable wealth and influence. And it was all built on the smart use of gunpowder.
So, after looking at all this, where does that leave us? What's the final verdict on the whole gunpowder empire theory? Well, it seems like it's a really powerful idea, a useful lens to look through, but it's not perfect. It needs a couple of tweaks.
First thing we have to remember is to zoom out. This military revolution, this massive change, wasn't just happening with the Ottomans, Safavids, and Mughals. It was happening all across Asia. From Ming China to feudal Japan and Korea, states everywhere were grappling with this same game-changing technology and coming up with their own unique solutions.
And I mean, just look at the global scale of this thing. You've got China, the literal birthplace of gunpowder, later importing Turkish musket designs to keep up. Then there's Japan, where they started mass-producing Portuguese-style guns, and some people argue even invented volley fire tactics. And in Korea, after some devastating invasions, musketeers went from being almost non-existent to making up more than half their entire military. The gunpowder age was truly a worldwide event.
So what's the big takeaway here? It's that the gunpowder empire theory isn't necessarily wrong. It's just incomplete. It gives us a fantastic way to understand how technology can put state building on steroids. But it was never just about the guns. It was also about ambition, ideology, and tactical genius. Maybe think of it like this. Technology was the turbocharger, but the engine of empire was already fired up and ready to go.
And that brings us to a final question to chew on. If one single technology, like gunpowder, played such a massive role in shaping the great empires of the past, it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What technology, whether it's AI or biotech or something we haven't even dreamed of yet, is forging the empires of tomorrow?